In this video, I'll be creating a couple of blast gates for my new dust extraction system. For this blast gate, I'll be using 18mm MDF. I chose to use 18mm because I had this on hand and I just wanted to use a few scrap pieces in my workshop. You can use plywood for this, and to be fair, that would be a better option. However, I had MDF on hand and I wanted to just get this used, and I wanted to get this project over and done with. Here you can see I divided 3 pieces at 9cm wide, and I'm now cutting them across using the miter saw. You could always use a table saw for these sorts of cuts, but because I had the miter saw already set up, I just went ahead and did that. Here I'm cutting them at square pieces at 9cm by 9cm. The next bit is to cut 1.5 cm strips, and this will be used on the internal of the gate. I'll cut 3 pieces in total. Here you can see I'm marking up the width that I need for each of these gates, and I've then cut these into the right sizes. These will then be used on the internal of the gate, and it will be glued in place. And for my particular gates, I decided to screw them. People use brad nails or clamps and let them dry, but just for my ease, I decided to use screws, and it helped in terms of moving the project further and allowed me to continue to the next stages. It's important to clear up any glue screws out internally, just so that it doesn't block any of the gates and the internal pieces. Here I'm now cleaning up all the edges on the miter saw. This can be quite dangerous, so please be careful if you are going to do this. Again, this is optional, but I decided to do it just so I have nice clean edges. And now that these are all cut, the edges are going to be fairly sharp, so I decided to go to hand sanding at 120 grit and clear off any sharp or rough edges, just so it didn't hurt or feel uncomfortable when using. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it just needs to be usable. Here I'm measuring the internal section of the blast gate, and my measurement was 6 centimeters. I made it 2 or 3 mil looser than it actually needs to be, this so that it allowed it to go in and out freely without any restriction. I found this was the best option when I did my test run using plywood, and keeping enough gap just allowed it to run a bit more smoothly and didn't cause any friction when sliding in and out. Next, in order to stop the actual barrier moving in and out and falling out, I decided to put some stop blocks, and here I'm just using some off-cut of MDF. Make sure you push the piece within the gate before you put the final side. Once I determined how it's going to look, I then marked up and write on the position that I want to keep on. I then found the center of each of the gates, and then using the drill press and a 40mm Forstner bit, I decided to drill this in. It's at this point I decided that I should have used plywood instead of MDF. However, it still worked out. It took a bit more longer than expected, however, I managed to get the holes drilled out and they came out fairly clean. You can see as I'm drilling through, the drill press decides to stop now and again because it kept getting clogged up with the MDF. If I used plywood, I wouldn't have this issue, and that's one of the things I would change next time was to make this. However, I persevered and I continued doing this, and I managed to get all the holes done in all 3 gates with no issues. It just took a little bit longer than expected. Now that I've gone more than halfway on one side, I decide to flip over and start drilling from the other side. This is the reason I chose to do this is because one, it will stop any blowout and tear out, and also it will just give a nice cleaner cut internally. Again, you can see the drill press just consistently keeps stopping, and it does take a bit of time, but we persevered and continue going. And eventually we made it through. So we have a nice clean cut with inside, and I was really happy with how it turned out. The next bit was to see if the 40mm pipe would fit within the hole. And luckily it fit in nice and snug, and it was a nice tight fit. I then cut out the PVC pipes that I wanted to use to the right lengths, and then I pushed them in to have a nice friction fit, and decided to rough up the internal edges of the MDF so that the hot glue can actually stick. This was recommended by a colleague of mine, and I found it really useful because I didn't want the wood glue to not adhere well, and it worked out really well. I chose not to use silicone because silicone can get quite messy, and I've been told that it's not actually as good as hot glue, so I opted not to use that and just continue with hot glue, and for me it worked out well. I've had no issues using this. I made sure as I was doing the hot glue, I put a nice thick layer all the way around. It's not particularly neat, but it did the job, and it held it really tight, and it had no issues in terms of coming apart. I made sure I put glue on both sides where the pipe connects, and make sure that it fully dries before I make any more adjustments or movements on this. And it was a fairly strong and tight joint, and I was really happy with that. Once it's dried, I put a straight 40mm push fit fitting on one side, and this will be connected straight into the ducting system, and the other end will be going into a straight flexi hose, and it worked out really well for me. As you can see here, I've got them nicely fitted on each station. I would like to say thank you for watching my video, and if you're new to my channel, feel free to subscribe. And if you've got any suggestions on how I can improve this next time, or any other ideas to improve my dust collection system, feel free to comment below, and like, share and subscribe to my video. Thank you very much.